Hello, Rev Walt. I think my audio is working. I came away from the last meeting very concerned that it might not be. Tell me if it is. Can you tell? Rev, will you give me a sense of whether my audio is coming through? I hated that I didn't get through, that it wasn't working last time. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Good. All right. All right. Okay. For that, I'm going to take a look at your question. There is nothing good or bad, but thinking makes it so. Exactly. I've been rewatching all of Shakespeare's plays, one night at a time. Hello, Shirley. Good to see you here. Um, let's talk about this. Nothing good or bad, but thinking makes it so. What do you think of that? Feel free to tell me your opinion in the text. I know it's a disadvantage that you have to text while I blabber, but I'm a blabber about it some. Um, I think there's something to it, but I wouldn't start, okay, personally, it's not your thing. Good. Tell me what is more your thing on that front. Uh, there are all sorts of opinions about this. So the one question is the origins, the way I think of it is the origins of normativity. Normativity means better or worse. Hey, Michael, good to see you here, man. Good, and I'm very pleased that my audio is working this week. It's funny, I came on last week, no, I felt grubby all weekend because of the sound issue. Um, you know, this is me as a hyper conscientious brute. Whatever I said, mm, I'm glad I said it, but I'm really sorry to have given you bad audio. So we were on the question of good and bad, and where it comes from. Now, there's the deontological version of it that you get uh, from all sorts of moralizers, which is that there's good and bad by some universal standard. Um, and that there's good and evil at the beginning of the universe. Even it's the Manichaean notion, uh, the idea that there's a devil and there's God and there's a debate between them. And I've mentioned this before. I'll mention it again. I'm buddies with the chief astronomer for the Vatican, and he's also a Catholic priest. And we do origins of good and bad work together. That he's part of the research group that's studying things about um, functional interpretive effort, selves making functional interpretive effort. You don't see that at the before life, and you see it with life. I don't think that the moon pulls on the tides because it's good for them or anything like that. Um, so I've got to explain how better or worse would come about, and it's always better or worse for someone. So, for example, someone who operates on the assumption that there of, let's say, theology, God, or even a higher power, someone who's trying to achieve something, this guy up in the sky, then you're still thinking about a beneficiary. You're thinking about a self who benefits from it. From my perspective, it's a fictional self. When you talk about it's good for God. God likes it. But nonetheless, you're talking about a beneficiary. So I think that good and bad emerge with organisms. And therefore, I think that the Danish prince, Hamlet, was right about this in this respect. Better or worse. I don't think good and bad are idealizations of it. They're almost superlatives, like best or worst. That is, they're static, and you say, this is good, that's bad. Okay. But I don't think it starts with thinking. Thinking is way later. Um, Thinking, I mostly think of as something that humans do with language. Language enables thinking. You could talk about an animal doing thinking. It's not the same anyway. And I would say that there's good and bad for the very first organism that ever was. And I have, we operate from a model for what the origins of life is. That is, I've been part of this research for 30 years, and we've been posing this simple question: what are selves and trying, and how did they start? How did they emerge? Um, and how is really important to this. I don't get to describe it. I have to explain it from nothing but chemistry, which tends to fall apart. So how would creatures struggling for their own existence, keeping their own shit together, ever emerge out of simple chemistry? And our model is super simple. It would have to be, because you're not starting, there's nobody engineering life. It has to come about by accident. Purposeful behavior, effort has to come about by accident. There's no one designing it. And this is before evolution. There's this kind of intuition that even among scientists that evolution explains life. Darwin would disagree. He would say, no, I am assuming the struggle for existence. I'm assuming selves and trying. I'm just trying to explain how they speciate by this process of elimination. So he wouldn't say he explained it. So I can't, and from my perspective, evolution is nothing but things falling apart applied to selves that are trying. It's not like some new thing. Yes. Okay. So life builds itself. Yes, that is not an explanation for how it starts, but it is an explanation for what it is. What I'm trying to explain, that is selves rebuilding themselves, and build. So I have to be. I'm a pain in the ass this way. I'm super fussy about the language. So life builds upon itself. Are we talking life? We're talking about life in general. Yeah, that's kind of a descriptive thing. It's borderline poetry from my perspective. I have to explain how you have chemistry that's falling apart, and I can say what that is about the chemistry that's falling apart. What I'm talking about there is its constraints. Um, uh, if you have a constraint out there, that is, by a constraint, what I mean is relative presences and absences of matter. So imagine a donut. A donut exists in a static state, but it's also decaying, so that if you left it out in the sun for a month, its form would be different. So I can't find a better word for it. There are technical terms for it, but I think the best word for it is a cluster flux. That is, I'm in flux, but I'm maintaining more or less the same relative presence and absences of matter, different kinds of matter. Um, so, uh, so that's what a donut is as well. So it could be deformed in various ways, but its form remains the same. So the form is what I've got to explain. So there are forms in the world, but what I got to explain is a form that does work to regenerate itself. Yeah, it's taking in energy. It's what we call a far from equilibrium system. I've got throughput. I take in energy, I poop out energy. A whirlpool does that too. A whirlpool is considered far from equilibrium. Its form is maintained by being far from equilibrium. The fact that there's water throughput and there's resistance, turbulence that resolves into a whirlpool's shape. All of that is the emergence of form. And it's a big deal in the sciences now. It's called self-organization. And we're saying, yeah, it's the emergence of form, but it's not form that is rebuilding itself. And then on top of that, what you use the word upon, and it's important in my work. Because the interesting thing about life is that it builds upon itself. It creates platforms for further, it creates a living being is a platform for further accumulation of constraints on top of it. So this may be fussy and maybe not where you'd want to go in this conversation, but I'm going to go there a little bit further. I'm about to do a video about it. Uh, so how do I maintain the constraints I am such that I can accumulate things upon them, even at the everyday level of learn something new every day? I'm building upon my foundation. What is my foundation? It's me regenerating myself. I have to regenerate myself faster than I would otherwise degenerate. In a universe where no matter what environment you're in, degeneration is going to be a key feature of your environment. So what am I? I am a constraint that channels energy into the regeneration of the constraint I am. The constraint I am is made up by now in me of just too numerous to mention, the quantity of constraints that are acting against each other, that are interacting with each other and keeping each other in checks. I'm a system of checks and balances that keeps itself, that regenerates the checks and balances that I am. But overall, the difference between live and dead, we call it the hologenic constraint. And it's exactly what you might have meant, because the language is a little loose, but it's organisms regenerating themselves. And that's the first goal, is regenerating themselves. Hey, everybody, it's just delightful to have you here, especially after my poor performance last week with the audio. Jesus. I think I'm getting it together, technically. So only when you get organisms could you talk about good or bad. They're not thinking it so. It's not as arbitrary as that. So you can go all the way out to this other extreme. So one version is there's good and bad at the origins of the universe. God willed the whole thing. He's the beneficiary. He's the one who wants things to go better, not worse, that sort of thing. At the other end, you get the postmodern extreme, which is there is nothing that's good or bad. Good and bad don't exist. You can turn that into pretzel logic too, which is it's good to decide that good and bad don't exist. That's like choose determinism or any of these other things that are self-contradictory. But postmodernism says, yeah, it's completely arbitrary. And it's just this person thinks this is good, this person thinks that is good. So that's where you get the extreme version of moral relativism. I'm a moral relativist, and I note that everybody who's a moral absolutist, or whatever you call the opposite of a moral relativist, they're always sure their damn morals are the best morals. I mean, that's just them saying the universe wants what I want, or I want what the universe, or the universe is on my side. So I won't go there either. What I would say is that better or worse are real once you have life. What's better or worse is open for endless debate. So when Darwin wrote Origin of Species, he ends it by saying, this is the beginning of one long argument. What he means is one long argument in defense of the idea of natural selection. But I'm arguing that life itself is one long argument about what's good and what's bad. And one thing that we've been trying unsuccessfully for the longest time is to claim that rationalism or logic or critical thinking would solve it. And I'm saying, no, they don't. They're like math. They're syntaxes. It's all about what you plug into the variables in your syntax. And we all have different standards. So if you think that you can resolve things with someone by sharing facts, no, I don't think so. Crunching the numbers or sharing or everybody getting logical, we come to the same conclusion. No, where we stand depends on where we sit. You and I have radically different life experiences. Not as different as some people I deal with. I got this buddy in mainland China who just blows my mind. He's so on the same page, and how he got there in mainland China, it just boggles my mind. I mean, he's read our books, he's translated our books, but he had to read them in English to understand them. And Terry's books, the originator of this approach, at Harvard, they said he writes like a truck. It's intense. I mean, I have yet to meet anybody who's read his two books, Symbolic Species and Incomplete Nature, and gotten it on the first try. It's hard going. I wouldn't understand it if I didn't get to spend so much time with him. I took a 1 hour and a walk with him this morning. We're talking all the time. We've been talking for 30 years. So I get it enough that I can translate it, and that's a lot of what I try to do. But he's hard work. And my friend Zhou over in China, he managed to do it. Mind-boggling to me. So anyway, no, I have to keep this in mind. I didn't actually fall that far from the tree. I'm an apple that fell just kind of directly under the tree. My culture was one in which where I've landed is not surprising. But for a guy from mainland China, and I know his teachers over there. One of them is a good friend and drinking buddy over there, who is the chief information philosopher for all of China. Now we disagree about everything. We played a fun game when I was in mainland China where we would. He doesn't speak any English. His teacher, this guy's teacher, Zhou's teacher. But we played a game where he would talk for 1 minute and someone would translate what he said, and then we'd drink some of their rice whiskey, a shot of it, and then I would speak for 1 minute, and we did that back and forth. We didn't find common ground. Um, uh, he ended up saying at the end of it, he said, "You're doing biology, I'm doing philosophy," and that was kind of perfect. I had said to him, "You've imported the wrong things from the United States. You guys had Taoism. Ours is, yeah, you should take that. You shouldn't take all of our what I think of as a kind of abstract engineering that we've learned to do and call science here in the United States, basically description, um, uh, and applied that. The Tao was a better way to go. You should have dropped that. Anyway, okay. Um, let's see. Okay, I'm gonna just here's this. Okay, but here I am ascribing good to a donut. The words are difficult. The words are really difficult. Okay, and then Mike Raskin, does that mean there's no concept of now, only motion? Okay, so once again, the fussy work it takes around words. Is there the concept of now? Of course, there's the concept of now. And concepts do make a difference. The way I think of this is that the concept of Santa Claus makes physical differences in the world in November and December. Santa Claus is not real. Um, but the idea of Santa Claus is real. Real means that it exists. We're talking in ontology, what exists. That's what ontology is. It's a philosophy of what exists. And from my perspective, what exists is anything that can do physical work in the world. So yeah, the concepts. Now, is now only a notion, I think is what you might mean, what might mean, or you might mean motion. Now is always in motion. In our work, the ontology of time is a real confusion. We're not. I don't think we'll solve it in this lifetime. There are lots of solutions out there. The main one being the most popular one is that you can mark time with degeneration. That degeneration is its own clock. So if you're watching how something decays, you know that it's much more likely to decay than to get organized. At one point, I had to make for Terry a video of a pool break. I was playing pool with a girlfriend a lot, and so we simply videoed it, and you can see that it's much more unlikely that they'll come back together to a triangle and then they'll split up. That's the second law. And it's not just applied to thermodynamics. I'm glad you're reading Incomplete Nature, Michael, and not to shill my own book. If you find it hard going, my book, Neither Ghost Nor Machine, The Emergence and Nature of Selves, is a easier read and very well vetted. The reasons Terry and I started taking walks was because because he was nervous, because I was kind of trying to write a simpler version of his theory. And he's always been a little nervous about that. And one of the reasons why Incomplete Nature is a hard go for people. It's a lot. I used to think that Terry buried the lead. That is, he didn't get to his main point. By now, I still think there's a little of that, but mostly it's he's got too many leads. You've really got to rethink things to get away from this thing that I said that the Chinese imported inappropriately. This kind of descriptive, vague, almost poetic language that I mean, I find it so frustrating. I've been thinking of it as like playing pinball with refrigerator magnets, like poetry magnets. It's not explanation. And so he's got to lay that groundwork in the book. And so, yeah, mine was an attempt to make it more accessible. Terry tends to think of the theory as counterintuitive. I actually think it's really intuitive when you frame it up right. I remember once explaining to someone the theories that people had about what information is, and her jaw dropped. She could not believe how ridiculous some of the notions are in rigorous, supposedly rigorous, or at least stuffy, but I would say fluffy academic philosophy. So, um, yeah, and also if Michael de Sosa Cruz, if you want, I can send you an audio version or a PDF of my book. Um, I don't like the price of my book. It's Columbia University Press. It's expensive. And by the way, I can't remember when I last sat down and read a book, a paper copy of a book. I read a book a week, but I do it by audio. So if you want the audio, I've got a computer generated voices. Those voices are marvelous. It's the only way I could keep up. Some people don't have that. They they don't find audiobooks a good way to go. I even had a student who said that he couldn't drive while listening to it. There's something about my mind that was I was an average to slow reader of books, read lots of them, and am very relieved that I now channel them through audio. So there's that. Okay, so there was something else. Now, the concept of now. In the meantime, when you think about it, you're dealing with the infinitesimal problem that calculus addresses, which is what's the width of now? Um, in a way, it's this invisible line moving from past to future. But I would not claim to understand time. I, I go at it. I'm not completely satisfied with the second law explanation for it, at least not when you get into the cosmological realm, deep time and what happens before the big, all that sort of stuff. I don't, it's not a place where my mind works especially well. Um, but in general, I do think in terms of verbs more than I think in terms of nouns. That takes enormous quantities of self-discipline to do that. And I do it haphazardly. That is not in casual conversation. But for example, Terry and I are working on a kind of an overall model for how change changes. And I sent him a chart yesterday and it had the nouns in it. And I made a second version of it, which just turned all the nouns into verbs. Uh, and here's another way, here's something that might be related to that. I haven't thought about whether it is. There are two words that I find useful because they are ambiguously nouns and verbs. Um, uh, Being is the main one. Living beings. What is that? Well, it's great because it actually is a double entendre. It has two meanings. Being, which is to Rev Walt's point, building as a verb. Being, that is, I am constantly in the business of being verbally, actively being a being. To stay in place, I have to keep running. So in the evolution of sex, there's a lot of talk about the Red Queen hypothesis. A Red Queen from Alice Through the Looking Glass, who has to run in order to stay in place. So there's this argument that sexual selection was the only way to deal with the rapid evolution due to very short life cycle of infectious agents. So the only way we could keep up was through recombination, which is a kind of running to stay in place kind of thing. I'm saying it's broader than that. I'm saying the fact that I have to regenerate all of these cells just to stay myself is just to stay alive. 330 billion cells is what you're producing every day, um, just to stay in place. That's Red Queen. And the problem I've been dealing with this last week, I made a video about it, didn't like how it came out, and I'm going to make another one. As symbolic organisms, as organisms that use language, which is technically called symbols, we engage in what I call SPEC, symbolic pseudo-efficient cause. Um, Language enables this. It invites it. It's the easiest way for us to deal with things. So what do I mean by that? We take a concept and we imagine it like a billiard ball knocking into another concept. So it's pseudo-efficient cause. Efficient cause is what Aristotle called what we think of as cause and effect. And so I can say that that an idea had impact on me, is an example, or that love builds consciousness. Terry went to a presentation by the new director of the new dean of the philosophy department at Berkeley. Um, and he just couldn't help but roll his eyes. It was basically saying love causes consciousness, whatever the fuck. So what you're doing there is you're using billiard balls, imaginary billiard balls, and you're pretending them that, or you could use them as magnets. So consciousness draws love. Okay, that is such a human, natural, easy way to think about this stuff, and we're saying that's not going to work. You got to explain it all in physical terms. You don't get to use a concept really until you've explained how it emerged from what preceded it. You got to start somewhere because we don't know where the beginning is. Not this generation. We don't know where the beginning is, and we may never. But in the meantime, we do know this universal, what's called the second law of thermodynamics, but what I call flow, the first law of everything, which is that if you've got a cluster flux, it will tend to fall apart. Stuff gets mixed up. It's not just energy that gets mixed up. There's no energetic difference. If I puff a little perfume into the room and it's concentrated in one side of the room, and within a while you can smell it over on the other side, that's not actually thermo. There's nothing energetic going on there. It's simply that there's a concentration, you could say a cluster flux of perfume scent right in the locality of where I puffed it, and then it dissipates. So we're talking about the dissipation. We start there. I've got to explain everything up from there. I have to explain me starting with that phenomenon, that everything falls apart. That's the burden on me. I also think it's a burden on science that we have been shrugging off through what I call defaulty logic. I think we've been cheating. The scientists have been cheating. They've been laughing so much at the ridiculousness of the theological approach and talking like they're conceptual machine stuff, that genes are kind of like information without ever explaining what information is. No, I haven't gotten around to explaining what trying is and how it starts, what selves and trying are and how they start. Okay. So, yeah, and all of that does relate to the stuff about the Trumpists. They are masters of this kind of pseudo-efficient cause and effect modeling with abstractions. And I did put out a video this last week. In the sciences, there's this argument that it's a process of elimination, and that if you have a theory that can't be eliminated, then it's not really a theory. It's disqualified, because if it can explain everything, it explains nothing. We're trying to explain why some things are more likely than others. Some outcomes are more likely than others. And but what I was trying to get across in that video is that human minds love non-falsifiable theories. We'd want a theory that is protected against any kind of argument against it, any kind of challenge to it. That's a human appetite that's really strong. You see it in something like it's all God's will. It's all God's will. There you'd say, well, okay, well, what about this? Well, no, that's God's will too. What about that? There's no way to prove it wrong. And there's something about the supernatural approach which is especially that way. It's why you'll end up getting ideologies that are generally tied to some assumption about what's universally good. Um, uh, uh, because it's super, and it will never, because it's dualistic, because it's in another realm. It's not in the physical work realm. It's in this other realm of your imagination. Then it can never be tested. How would we ever know if God existed? What kind of empirical proof could actually show that he existed? Well, it would have to be some physical proof. but physical proof could be, you can get that by all sorts of other means. You can always explain away the physical proof and say, well, no, but God exists out there. So it's like a no tags back ultimate wild card trump card. You can say anything you want about what goes on in this other realm, the super realm, and it's a trump card in that it's super. That is, it beats all. So yeah, no wonder, no wonder. Uh, 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 Good. All right, that's good. Bookshelves are interesting. I mulched all my books. My brother gave me the word mulch. He's an English professor. What I did was I cut off all the bindings on the books and I ran them through OCR. So my entire library, everything but my Audible account, um, all the things I bought and all of that. And as a result, I no longer have a bookshelf. I had all the spines, like maybe 800 spines of books, and I did think about making a fake bookshelf where I just use some wood framing and I put the spines up there on a piece of flatboard, foam board or something. Didn't get around to it. Ended up giving them all to a fellow student who thought he might do that. Okay, so but they are kind of an altar to one's identity. People come into your house and like dogs sniffing each other's butts, they sniff each other's bookshelves. And um, Biblocide, that's it. That's it. That's right. And some people think it's sacrilegious. In the meantime, I've got all these friends who were professors who are now going emeritus, and Terry was one. He went emeritus from Berkeley last year, and his library was massive, and nobody wants them. Not even the library at Berkeley. Not even the library at Berkeley. The main library there is Doe Library, and it's fabulous. It's built on this little mound, and it's got 12 floors down. 12 floors down. This giant library, and these wonderful bookshelves. I don't know if you've ever seen these, but they have a crank on the side because they want to pack them in as tight as possible. So you turn the crank, and it opens a gap so you can get a book. I wouldn't. I am so lucky to be working in the modern era. I mean, even just typewriters. I'm left-handed. My handwriting is atrocious and incredibly slow. The hardest part for me of writing books is signing autographs on the inside cover. I even sometimes misspell my name. I mean, I'm not good at that. So I am so thankful, and so this is a disastrous time to live, but it's also a marvelous time. I don't see why I should ever have to leave my computer because it's just so much fun. There's so many things you can look up and enjoy. This week I've been enjoying re-listening to what I found to be a very powerful play. It's recorded in 1964. It's called After the Fall. It's by Arthur Miller, and it's autobiographical. So you've got Marilyn Monroe and the McCarthy trials and post-World War II and concentration camps and all of that. It's all told it's all presented as what's going on inside his head, one guy. And he's trying to figure out, he's dealing with the tension between knowing and not knowing other people, between us being autonomous and us being collective, between us, we are all one, and us actually being individuals. And I find it powerful. I started listening to it probably at age 8. My dad had it on LP in bookshelves, and I consider this very formative in my education, the things that I listened to over and over back then. At a time when I had no idea what I was going to do with my life. I was an incredibly slow starter, but somehow I steeped myself in a few things that he had on the shelf, waiting for Godot, a complete reading of Alice in Wonderland, a complete reading of Nonsense Verse by Edward Lear and Lewis Carroll. Many of those poems memorized from having listened to them so many times. Shakespeare, had a bunch of Shakespeare LPs. It's just, I feel lucky to have gotten that start on audio. Yeah, so yeah, and how did I find it? I don't have the LPs anymore. Internet Archive. The Internet Archive had the whole thing up there. And I put it up on Facebook because I love it so much. It stars Jason Robards and Faye Dunaway as young actors. And it's just powerfully conveyed, and I would put it up here. I won't take the trouble right now of doing that, but what I do encourage you to do, if you even show up for this, which, good Lord, I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure I would if I wasn't doing it, but I am really grateful that you are. And I encourage you to be, to friend me on Facebook, where I'm Jeremy Unsure Sherman. Um, Oh, Lego creations. I just saw that. Let's see. My bookshelves have the books that are important to me, plus all the notes I've taken on what I've read, and also your Lego creations. I love that. And here's the question for you. If I were doing Legos, I would definitely be listening to audiobooks while I was doing that. Do you do that? Um, Maybe not. Maybe the stuff you're building is more technical than that and actually takes some mind. I have to be very careful. I love co-processing. I think there are only three ways to do more stuff. One is to drop something off your to-do list. Another is to do it more efficiently. And the third is co-processing. So I co-process as much as I can. And there are some limits. There are things I can't do. But anytime I'm shopping or driving or exercising or cleaning, I'm listening to books. Uh, I or showering. I mean, I don't let my mind stop. I don't want it to. Someone asked me an interesting question on in the comments this morning. Someone asked me, "Are you self-pleasuring by making these videos?" Yeah, of course I'm self-pleasuring. I mean, I'm totally addicted to this. Not to the medium YouTube, but to self-expression, totally addicted and totally pleasurable for me. I mean, can you imagine? I'm having the time of my life, and literally as well, because I also know that I won't be able to do this for much longer. I'm watching peers get dementia. It's a little early, but that, I was just talking to someone and saying, yeah, our 65-year-old, our 68, what is she? Our 74-year-old friend is beginning to lose it. So I got to make hay while the sun shines. And so, yeah, there's a separate question, which is whether this is exercise, whether this is me off jerking. And first of all, I got to say, I wouldn't put it past me. Um, I also got to say that if I was, I'd be the last to know. I can also say that there are lots of people who make that assumption about me, that I'm an influencer who doesn't really care about the concepts I'm doing it. I just want to feel grand about myself. Um, I have to watch out for that. Here's an example. This last week, my view numbers are way down. So there was a time when I was getting 150,000 views on a video. I'm not. There were some videos I put out this week. I got 230 views. So I want to take in that news that I'm not appealing. I don't want to be demotivated by it. I find that I work a little bit more, you could say, second guessingly as a result of it. Like, is this going to work? Is that going to work? So there's a part of me like that. But I also recognize that as I grow older, and as I fill my mind more, and especially because I'm doing this stuff where I wouldn't put it past me, there's going to be limited audience. I lose subscribers every month. I don't gain subscribers. I gained a bunch at one time. It's not a huge number. I maybe lose 30 to 100 a month. And I'm assuming some of that is that it's more than people want or feel they need. And I totally get that. You do not need to understand us to be, you do not need to understand yourself to be yourself. All lives are going to be unexamined to a large extent. You couldn't ultimately uh, examine your life. There's no way to completely examine your life. And there's also limited need to and lots of aversion to. That's why on Substack, I did decide to go. I'm not sure if I'll stick with it, but I went with the name "Stomaching Us." It's not the examined life is no picnic. Okay, let's see what we got here. Let's see. Um, I'm going to meet my older sister for lunch, which I've done many times. Why am I nervous? Like a first date. This is great, Tree Bard. I have the same issue with my oldest brother, who I've admired for so many reasons for so long, and who has been wary of me and has often gone as far as to say your character needs work. And I remember when I was getting together with him, this is back in the 1970s, and I was saying, okay, yeah, I haven't seen him in a while. I really don't want to screw it up with him. It's like a first date. Um, if you can say more about why am I nervous like it's a first date? At least I can say this. You don't have to share it here, but that's the examined life I'm after. When I find something off about me, I get curious about it. I don't ask it as a rhetorical question, like, why the hell am I nervous about a thing like this? Like I shouldn't be. I ask it as a real question, and I usually learn something from it. Um, let's see. I am curious about audience. What do we have in common? What drives us to what you are sharing? That's a great question. And I would love any speculations about that. I should even probably put that out as a question, as a post on YouTube, to see what, if anything, draws you. Um, what do you like about me is a question right on that edge. I mean, the problem I've had with my brother is that he thinks I'm an egomaniac. He's actually someone who thinks I'm off jerking. Sometimes I don't think that's true all the time, but he has certainly had that impression of me and told me so. We have a direct enough relationship that he can say that stuff to me. Um, and it's one of these kind of tar baby situations where if I say anything, um, it can easily explain this. Well, that's just your ego talking. So we can do that to each other. That's one of the techniques I try to impose with Trumpists is you're just jerking off. But I also know that if you say that to a decent person, there's nothing the decent person can say back. So I have to be very careful about it. I don't want to impose tar babies on other people. I There we go. Yes, I understand about the autocorrect. Uh, we will never see ourselves as others see us. Yeah, that's right. And we probably wouldn't entirely want to, like if we had the mind reading ability to do that. It's also why I think I find greatest intimacy in laughing at and with each other. Um, uh, I find that loosens things up, is to admit that we've got these ulterior um, senses of each other. It's something I admire about sitcoms. Sitcoms are full of that, someone leaking out what they really think and then taking it back, leaking it out, taking it back, but kind of a wink about it. Uh, and it's also fascinating to think about this question: why do we care about why do we care what other people think? So you got the extremes on that too. Um, Mostly on the side of you shouldn't care. If you get a chance, watch a country music video by a band called Montgomery Gentry. Um, it is fascinating on this subject. It's a song called, I think it's called "What Do You Think About That?" Uh, I'll have to look it up. But it's based. The chorus is, "I don't care what other people think. What do you think about that?" And it's one of these guys who's pretending like he's a complete maverick. He's a country guy, um, and that nobody he's proud that nobody that he's basically singing the anthem of "Don't care what other people think." Meanwhile, the thing is completely Oedipal. That is, he's got this straight-laced maternal neighbor who's infatuated with him because he's a maverick kind of a guy. It's fascinating to watch this thing and to see how we dance between, yeah, I'm independent minded. I hope you like that kind of thing. Check it out if you get a chance. It's fascinating. I love that video for looking at us, and it's completely unaware of how it is. I mean, there's nothing ironic about it. It's these guys pretending they're badasses, and the thing ends with everybody adoring them while they're playing the song on stage, including the the matron next door, the foxy matron next door, who leaves her husband at home in bed. I shouldn't spoil it for you, but who leaves her husband at home in bed, frustrated because she's drawn to this maverick. Um, it also speaks to something that's very that you have to be able to stomach if you stomach me and you stomach us, which is this whole black market for affirmation and reassurance. Um, it's easy to not care what other people think if they adore you. Uh, that's a fundamental tension I have to deal with. I've got some fans by now. That's kind of nice. Didn't always. Um, uh, And so if I ever say, hey, look, I don't care what other people say, I'm just speaking my honest opinions, don't believe me. Uh, how would you know whether you really don't care? Well, you'd only know if everybody left, you know. We don't miss our water till our well runs dry. And that's about water. When it comes to affirmation, it's even more the case. I wouldn't want to it would be buzzkill to my neediness to recognize how needy I am. And I'm inviting you to be amused by that same problem. I mean, I don't think of myself as I think the Montgomery Gentry song is pathetic, but I don't actually think it's because they struggle with the question of caring about other people. I do that too. So you know, me too. Actually, my older brother, who's now deceased, scared me even more. He was a doctor with a pretty big ego and was rather moralistic at times. Oh well, R.I.P. Bob. Um, I did write to my brother this week, and one of the things I said is, okay. I'm furious at you. This was a joke. I'm not furious at him. I said, so here's what's going to happen. We're going to forget what we argued about, and then we're going to grow old, and then we're going to die. But it's almost like, all right, I'm furious at you. Here's what's going to happen. Nothing. You know? There is this time when, yeah, I find that useful to keep in mind that this is fleeting. I did make a video about that this week. Just how powerful it was for me to turn my mother's death shortly after my father's death into the fiction that it was a surprise death for her. She thought she was in perfect health when he died. He'd had cancer for 13 years. And then within about a year, she had lung cancer metastasized to brain, even though she never smoked. And then she died. And what I took from this is the advantages of speed grieving, which is actually an older idea. I'm trying to remember the name. It's not Cicero, but it's a guy. This was part of the Stoic philosophy, is to remember how fleeting this was. It's also a Buddhist thing, which gets you this question that I picked up first in that Alice in Wonderland I listened to years ago: important, unimportant. That's what the Red King says in the last chapter. He's trying to figure out what's important and what's not important. And that had come up too in a comment this week. Someone talked about, oh, no, it was elsewhere. I said that most of the world's woes come from people treating big decisions as small ones and small ones as big ones. And someone asked, okay, well, so is that just a dissociation or displacement? And I said, no, it runs, yes, it's that, but no, it runs deeper than that. We are all dealing with this problem of what's significant, what's signal, what's noise, what can you ignore, what you can't. This is triage. You know, what will take care of itself, what is hopeless, you can't actually change it. Where should you focus your attention? What battles should you pick? What sub battles should you pick within that battle? All of that sort of stuff, down nested layers after layers. And the problem is, as we all know, some seemingly significant things prove insignificant, and some seemingly insignificant things prove significant. That's one of the problems with life, is that we can't actually tell. We can only guess. We're somniscient. We have only some ideas. But I did have an idea this morning that relates to that. So I have these clients who I see. And by the way, if anybody ever wants a one-on-one, the first half hour is free, and you can see if you want it. I do it sliding scale. I have clients who pay me well, and clients who pay me what they can afford. And I find it all fascinating, and they so far find it useful. I don't have clients who are walking away because it seems to be going in circles or anything like that. In the meantime, what I've noticed about them is that I have to keep track of 3 different conversations, and this will relate to, I think you'll be able to make some use of this. There's venting, there's analyzing, there's strategizing. There are 3 different conversations. The venting is probably a large proportion of what people do in therapy. And venting is basically off-jerking or exercise. It's where you give yourself a pep talk that's not just positive. It's positive about what you want to do and negative, what you want to see happen, and negative about what is happening. So it's a frustration in the aspirational gap. I wish things were like this. They aren't like this. And then it'll include scapegoating and whatever. It's a therapeutic thing that people need. I would guess that 80% of therapy might be that. But in the sciences, so that's an expression of yearning, what you want. And if you haven't seen the short video, comic video, it's all about the nail. Watch that. It's fascinating. Because the guy wants to get to strategy, and the woman in it, who's got a nail stuck in her head, is just in a venting state and is very frustrated that he won't just listen to her. It's really worth checking that thing out. So you got the venting, and then you got the strategizing, but in between you've got this thing that is where I spend most of my time, just the luxury of my circumstances, which is I'm trying to set aside my values long enough to see what is. It's this scientific bias against bias, that you're trying to employ the power of neutral thinking based on the assumption, the Buddhists would say it like truth waits for eyes unclouded by longing. But the way I think of it is to get what you want, set aside what you want long enough to see what is, and then better informed, you'll do a better job of getting what you want. So it's really hard to go from venting to analysis, but analysis is crucial. And only from analysis can you come up with better strategies, decide what battles to fight. Do your triage from a neutral assessment. It's very hard to make that transition, and most people don't. Most people go from the venting, like venting would also include a lot of rhetorical questions, which I try to shift clients towards analysis. I say, okay, let's take that. I just did this a minute ago with the nervous to talk to my sister. You take a rhetorical question and you turn it into a real question. So that's what I'm trying to get people to do, and most people go straight from venting to strategy. And I think we lost a lot of ground to Trumpists by doing that. We didn't step back and analyze what the actual fuck is going on with these people. What's up with assholes? Or absolutists, if you don't like the term asshole. The only reason I'm using the term asshole is because everybody's using it. I hate the term. It's a stupid term. It's not because it's vulgar. I have no problem with vulgarity. It's imprecise, and you can't use it with kids. Which is exactly where we have to start our work on asshole prevention. I don't know if you know any kids, but they have asshole comes easy to kids. It's our you could say our core state. You could say that that Trumpism is just immaturity. I mean, I think there's something accurate to that. And that all of childhood, what we're trying to do with our kids, I learned this on the commune. This was actually a concept there. Our job one is to make it so they don't grow up to become assholes. That's like job one for education all across the board. Who knows what jobs these kids are going to end up with? I can't even imagine. I don't even know if they'll have jobs, but I do know that the problem with being an asshole is going to be a problem we all have to deal with, and the problem of strategizing, not from a venting place. Not saying take this job and shove it because you're angry, but to step back and figure out as neutrally as possible what your situation is. And it's also disappointing to do that because you got to get off your high horse to do it. To say, okay, yes, I understand why you're outraged, and I understand the thrill of righteous indignation. Now, get off it and zoom up and down. What you're doing is you're standing in one place, you're holding tight to one place. Now let's look at the counter arguments. Let's look at it from above. Let's look at it below. Let's do a kind of what I used to call rung running, where you run up and down the levels of analysis to try to figure out what's actually going on. It's also where strategic empathy comes in. I mean, I try to be empathic with the Trumpists. That's got nothing to do with my sympathy for them or my charity. I mean, I might have some of that, but that I don't want my empathy to do that. I want to put myself in their shoes and remember when they were mine so that I can figure out how to cut them, how to make them bleed better because of their excesses. I admit to the part of me that wants to be famous. I just don't want that to rule me. I admit that I'm off jerking some by having a meeting like this, a conversation like this. But if that's what's driving me, then my audience is the wrong audience. I came up with this one this week. I don't know if do you know the concept, the gee whiz factor? And the science is what we're talking about is the gee whiz factor is someone is just awed to be thinking these big thoughts. It makes everyone feel like a genius. That it's that aspect, and a lot of people are drawn to that. That's what's going on. It's just like the first time they've gotten a chance to feel like, wow, I'm big enough to picture the whole world and understand it. And it had come up because Terry had this meeting at Stanford where he heard this presentation about love as consciousness from the new dean of the philosophy department. And the audience was oohing and awing at it. That's the gee whiz factor. And I realized this week, no, it's actually the me-whiz factor. I'm a wizard. I'm brilliant. I'm a genius. It's really a kind of off jerking. And if I'm doing that and my audience is doing that, it's just wanking. And I don't want to do that. I don't think I actually in my bones want to do that. There were times in my life when I did. But it kind of shows up in how I respond to comments on YouTube, is that I actually take the question seriously, and I'm sure I've lost some people from them simply saying, "No, I didn't want that. I came here, I fed you something." It's like I've even joked about this on Facebook. Hey, what the fuck? I put out this brilliant concept and I didn't get nearly enough likes and people didn't agree with me. What's wrong? That's an ironic stance of what it's kind of like the negative role model. I'll play the negative role model to keep in mind the negative role model. I don't want to be like that. So whatever makes it so, whatever my audience seems to have in common, I hope is that you stomach us. That you stomach us. I've had this problem. It was even going to turn into a song I've never gotten around to writing, but I miss who I mistook you for. I miss who I mistook you for. I have been eager enough for an audience that it took me a while to realize that there are three kinds of people who are drawn to me. One kind of person is people who are drawn to me because they feel some charisma off me. I don't know. I mean, whatever it is. Could be I have a PhD, or I work on origins of life, or I talk fancy, or whatever. Or I'm a hottie. There was a time when there people were drawn to me that way. Less so as I grow older. Then there are the people who are drawn to me because they think I am affirming their convictions. So they're drawn to me because he's giving me further evidence that I'm right. I've had several people who did that around the asshole, the psychopractology. They knew an asshole. They saw my book, and despite my efforts in the book to keep it from being one of those books that basically says we're the good guys and let's talk about those assholes out there, they still heard it in there and went with it. And then there are the people who I'm hoping to get, and I suspect I've got in you, which are people who are actually curious and trying to figure this stuff out with me, or figure it out on their own, are tapping into what I offer for what it's worth. That's the conversation I want. That's the conversation. It's us sitting on a porch in the universe, some of the only chemical forms that can speculate about the whole ball of wax and us in it, and are doing it without that, where somehow they disappear, their need to feel affirmed disappears, and they can look squarely at what we are, as squarely as a human can, which is limited. Uh, Yesterday, I heard a presentation by a neuroscientist friend of mine, full-fledged. He's a psychiatrist, and it was on global mind, which is a problematic concept, but one that it's a problematic one because it tends to go sci-fi, and also Pollyanna. And he's doing this whole presentation. It's closer to if I were in charge of the world, or what we should all decide is morality, than I want to do much of. But he has to, because he's working for a foundation that I introduced him to. Unfortunately, it was a foundation that's very, if I were in charge of the world, and global brain is a wonderful thing. They actually, I introduced the group to it, and then the head of the foundation decided I was too pessimistic and didn't want to talk to me anymore. And in the meantime, he went off and worked with all these fellow colleagues and paid them, and that was fine. That was fine. I was okay with that, but because I wasn't going to work for him the way he wanted. I wasn't going to pretend that kumbaya is the inevitable outcome. This guy was a follower of Teilhard de Chardin, and from the first time he encountered me as a foundation director, said, "I want to talk to you about this stuff. I want to do a foundation on Chardin's work." And I said, "I'm not your man. That dog don't hunt with me, but I can introduce you to some people." And I ended up getting him a bunch of jobs, but he couldn't take me on that front. But here's the challenge. So he's doing what is it? He's kind of doing analysis, but he's also kind of doing strategy, but he's also kind of doing the venting. Because venting isn't just, I need a better word for it. It's basically exercise. So it's as much about how we're the good people as it is about how they're the bad people. It's a kind of a present company accepted kind of thing. It was really interesting to go through this meeting. He was talking about, a moral world, global brain has to somehow end up with harmony and no loss of life. Okay, that's a should, and it's also completely detached from what life is. It's not a case of stomaching us. I call it the PETA effect, or the PETA factor. So you look at life, death is, it's just everywhere. I mean, a cod will produce 30 million eggs to yield replacement rate. That's a whole lot of death. This was one of the shocking things about Darwin, and one of the attractive things about God. God doesn't do that. God doesn't make mistakes. It's not trial and error with God. He just designs what he wants. It's all in his head. He's a perfect engineer that way. And death is an outrage. Why would, how could there be species that would go extinct? That doesn't make any sense. In the meantime, Darwin comes along with this amazing cosmic wedgie, trial and error, which means a whole lot of error. And if you look around the world, then we're in that. We didn't escape it. I call that romantic humanism, the sense that somehow humans, because we can be rational and principled, because we can point to someone like Martin Luther King, why can't we all be like that? And there shouldn't be any death. Death hurts. Yeah, death hurts a lot. It hurts humans more than it hurts animals, because we, with language, know what we're losing. It's inconceivable to us. We have all of this self-narrative about ourselves. My number one priority, whether I like it or not, whether I approve of it or not, is me. I really do pay a lot of attention to me in behaviorally, emotionally, otherwise. So and conceptually. So this squeamishness about death, and you see this in PETA. I am mostly vegetarian for climate reasons, not because I wouldn't want to violate nature's laws by eating other animals. We are uh, that's the nature of life. You have to be able to stomach that. I am trying to minimize human death. I do think the meaning of life is to not end it. I mean, that basic kind of for me. It so uh yeah, uh thinkers to rest on harmony. Toto Now says, oh, Toto Now, are you the guy who asked about now earlier? Um, I just made that possible connection. I'm taking a look here just to see where now came up. Not a fast reader here. Let's see. Okay. No, it was Mike Raskin who said that. Okay. But thinkers to so harmony is an interesting word. Uh, as is balance. Um, equilibrium, all those sorts of things. I think what we're talking about is tensions, melting pot harmony, uh, where there's enough discord. I have music as a metaphor because I work in music theory when I'm playing jazz and all that. So if it's just homogenous, everybody singing the same note, it's a problem. I am working on. I just decided I'm going to write a video on the long-term health consequences of unity. There are real problems with it. That is, perfect harmony is really dangerous. Uh, but if you think about it as checks in balance or conflict, what we call in this work contrograde, that is, flows that flow against each other, and how from them sometimes can be generated a new orthograde, a new flow. So that's what I think. For example, the turbulence that resolves into a whirlpool is contrograde from which a higher level orthograde, the orthograde meaning uh, it's graded, it's biased in the same direction, the whirlpool, it emerges. And then if you take two of those, well, orthogrades that are products of lower level controgrades and put them against each other, you end up with the potential for higher level orthogrades. So back to this question of how we end up with hierarchy. Lots of researchers just assume hierarchy, but we have to explain. I have to explain how you ever get hierarchy in a world where everything's falling apart. You wouldn't expect stuff to build on top of itself. Um, yeah, you're not. Yeah, I see that. Yeah, but yeah. So I have to explain that, and I explain it with controgrades. And the same is true, let's say, to make this intuitive, if you and I were having an argument about something, um, then at some point, either we gain some new insight from it, or we might be able to simply say, um, we could start to have an argument about our argument. So that's a higher level orthograde from a lower level contrograde. Now, I mentioned in one of my videos this week, Noam Chomsky, who I support as I endorse his political stance. I never met him. I hung out with one of his best friends, Dan Ellsberg, and Dan was always interested in what I had to say about his linguistics. So Chomsky is an example of a non-falsifiable theory. That is, he assumes that there's this module, and he's an example of how you can add epicycles to it. So when he came up with his concept that language is not learnable, therefore you have to have this happenstance evolved module that handles grammar. And what we're going to do is we're going to figure out how that hardware works. That is what the programming is is vaguer than that. Such that it could cover all grammars in the world. And so they add more and more epicycles. They add more and more. Well, okay, so we have to have a module within this module within a module, but it's all done with modules, and it's just kind of the assumption that the mind is basically a computer that plugs in local languages into this grammar thing. And then he concludes all that. He says, no, that's not actually what it is. It's this concept called merge. Merge to Chomsky. This is where he landed in his theoretical work. equally facile, this concept of the merge. But he's basically saying the only thing you need is this capacity for iteration, where you get hierarchy. That is the fact that I can nest sentences within sentences. Now, in our work, we appreciate him for raising this fundamental question, which is why get out of the nitsy detail that linguistics was stuck in and think about what is the nature of a universal grammar. And we do think, in our work, we do think there is something like universal grammar. That is, there are forced solutions, what they call them in evolutionary theory. That is the only way you could make symbols like language work, is if you had certain kind of regularities, so people, for reference. So for example, if I say that idea I just shared was relevant to something else, the use of the word that has to be close to what I just referred to. If it's someplace else, then you wouldn't know what I'm talking about. I have this problem when I'm doing unscripted videos sometimes. I have these kind of dangling this and that's, and I have to watch out for that because I'm trying to get ideas across. So that aspect of universal grammar is true, is valuable. But where I wanted to go was his idea that we can do that nesting. Yeah, language enables us to do endless nesting. That is, we can have words about words about words about words about words. We can do that conceptually in a way that other organisms don't. But I'm saying that it runs actually deeper than that. That if you actually start from the origins of, if you start from everything falling apart and recognize that it's falling apart at different rates and falling apart against each other, this is falling this way, this is falling that way, then you end up with the commingling, almost the moire patterns of things pushing against each other, checks and balances. And sometimes out of that, you could say the net effect of conflict is a higher level insight. So this is one thing we should keep in mind in this work. Often I'll be dealing with a paradox and going round and round on the paradox. There was one this morning. I'm trying to remember. But anyway, okay. Am I running in circles, or am generating heat but no light, or is it possible that something will come out of it? So the same is true in your work life. It's there everywhere. When you're pushing against something, when you're doing work against something else, you cannot tell whether that work will produce something until it has. Until then, you don't know if that work might never yield anything. People say, well, your commune failed. Does that mean all communes fail? I don't know. I mean, I don't think so. I think it was a good try and there'll be more tries and we might learn something from it, but it's also quite possible that they simply can't. And that it does relate to this question about harmony. That is, can you make a sustainable society? I'm not sure. Okay, so let's see. In terms of economics, theorize the periods of stability can actually lead to instability and crises. Yes, and Michael, I'm looking for a quote from Edmund Burke that also makes that argument, that we really have to watch out for what stability does. From what I remember of something I read, and I don't remember where, that's one of the problems with audiobooks, Burke was aware of that way back when he founded conservatism. He recognizes the problems with stability. Okay, let's see. Wasn't Chomsky's work based on the a priori of Immanuel Kant? I don't know if he pulls that directly. I haven't read enough Chomsky to know whether he pulls it directly. I would say that what's his name? Metaphors to Live By. My neighbor, who I had dinner with once. I'm just taking a look. The name escapes me. When you get to be my age, the names are the things that's slowest coming back to mind. Metaphor. Don't think of a white elephant. That guy. Metaphors we live. George Lakoff. George Lakoff is definitely a Kantian in his approach. and we had a very frustrating conversation, mostly about the political side of things. But it was delightful. We had a great time. Um, Nancy Mace's perfect example as she cycles through on most of her videos. Yeah, I know of her. I know the cosmetic store the incident, um, and then possibly falsifiable. Thank you, George. You got it, Michael. You got it before me. You're a younger mind. Um, no, he's perfectly Kantian. Let me think just a second about whether Chomsky is Kantian. Yeah, I can at least say that he does what some people did with Kant. So Kant is a guy who's arguing we can never know the real world. It's a little bit close to where we started all of this with there's nothing good so bad other than what people think so. Um, uh, and and some people ran with that in the early postmodern direction. Um, so actually, this will relate to a conversation I had yesterday about landmark, which is a system here in the United States. Um, we talked about it yesterday. I had talked about it with one person here. I won't name you. Feel free to name yourself. We had a lovely conversation, and so it started out as German idealism. If we can't know reality, then maybe there is no reality. Or at least reality is whatever you make it. So this is a kind of what is it? It's an omnipotence. That is, you get to create your own reality, and by believing it, you will end up making it so. And so throughout history, you see people tempted in that direction. Christian Science is an example of that. Uh, there was a whole version of it in the early days after Kant. Uh, it came back in Est, and then it came back again in The Secret. Um, nicely done, Jeff. And I don't know how Landmark handles that, but I actually know the guy who introduced Erhard, Ernest Erhard, was it Werner Erhard, to the German idealist approach. It's a research colleague who still works with me, a guy named Jay Ogilvy, and he had conversations with with Erhard, and this guy might be taking undue credit, but that he suggests that he may have been the one who vaccinated, who injected that into Erhard's mind. Okay, but started me on the journey that eventually led to you. Uh, Thank you for that. It was important to me that way. It led me to me too. um, where I think he gets off is where I break from it now. Um, is oh, he changed his name from Jack Rosenberg to Werner Erhard. I have that in my family too. I just want to tell you because Jack Rosenberg certainly sounds Jewish. So I had this uncle named Roy Warshawski. Um, a pretty Jewish name as they go, Polish Jew, and he wanted to start a car catalog company. He's actually in the catalog business Hall of Fame because of this. He called it J.C. Whitney. J.C. There is no J.C. Whitney, but he picked J.C. Jesus Christ and Whitney for white, and that's how he gained his cred. Let's see. Okay, so where I think that where Lakoff went next, set aside his politics, was that he went postmodern. He basically said, we're all being tripped up by these physical metaphors in a body. Yes, I see the connection now to Kant. Yes, Lakoff's definitely. Oh, sorry, I don't know about Chomsky, but yes, this is the connection Lakoff to Kant. Is that we're all biased, and there's no reason to suspect. For example, in one of his later books, he talks about how we talk about forks in the road, that there may be no such thing because, after all, we're used to deal with them in the physical world, and therefore must be no connection. Uh, there may be no connection to reality at all. Okay, yeah, there may not be a connection to reality, but where we go is, no, our metaphors aren't pulled out our asses. And we're not living in the abstract. We have to keep ourselves going. We're not this abstract mind or consciousness that's disembodied. Um, uh, Snowy owl, yes. My answer is it would have it, so there are ways we're trying to work with mathematicians on ways to mathematicize the physical process. But notice what we're doing when we go with a symbol system like math or language. Um, this came up in a conversation. I've had a few conversations the last few. It was with Jeff, who shall not be mentioned, Jeff Cheney. Um, in the beginning was the word, not in the beginning of the universe, not in the beginning of life. Actually, way towards the end of it, this tiny little sliver, the symbolic species we are, these creatures who use language. So, yeah, in the beginning of the end, maybe was the word. I would find that somewhat possible. That is, words are, I do not think it's easy for a language using organism to survive here or anywhere in the universe. I think this newfangled contraption we ended up with just a few short years ago, a few short millennia ago. Um, no, it's a real problem. If you haven't seen my video about it, I got a video in a children's story about where I imagine it's called RNDism. So you got a god who's trying to figure out how to make a sustainable planet, and he decides he's going to try to make these stewards that use language and technology, and it's not working very well so far, but it's got some promise, it's got some potential. But the problem is with math, Snowy Owl, and with any of this stuff is we treat that like that's the ground. It's not the ground. It's what it is tokens. It's like it's patterns on pages that we interpret, that only we interpret. And so I keep on encountering people who want to talk like the universe is a computer and that it's actually using symbols. We have this major problem in our understanding of AI. AI is a token processing machine. Those tokens mean something to us as we program them and out the delivery end, but it is not understanding anything. It's not even working with symbols. It's working with tokens, binary bits of basically binary switches. Don't even think of them as information. That's not information until it's interpreted. So let's see. So math can certainly simulate or model hierarchy, but it cannot explain it. You have to explain it in physical terms. And what you've got to, so in most explanations of hierarchy that you get of evolutionary biology, talk about the advantages of having it. None of them, except for the one we're working on, deals with this much greater challenge, which was how could it ever come about and stick around long enough to be useful? Yeah, there are advantages to us being collective as we are. It helps us in competition with other um, organisms, like David Sloan Wilson's argument. That's his argument, is that the collective has advantages. It's basically united we stand, divided we fall, that kind of stuff. But none of that explains what it is. You've got to explain how it stick around in a universe that is simplifying things all the time. And here I can give you a bridge over to where I'm going in one of the videos. I probably won't make it this week. I'm going to be in Mexico starting tomorrow, and I'll lower my production values or whatever. But anyway, I imagine I'll be slower with videos. But this is one that's coming out soon, and it deals with something that you know from your personal life. And I've talked about it a little bit before. We're calling it inverse Darwinism. It's the other half of Darwinism. It's what Darwin recognized in passing and didn't get to. And in the meantime, everybody ran with natural selection, which is basically process of elimination, not selecting anything, as the explanation for everything. And it has been burdened ever since with explaining, okay, how would you ever get as fancy a stuff as us by chance mutation in a universally mutating universe where everything's falling apart? How would you ever get us when all you got is death? How are you going to get us? Well, so let me bring it up to a very clear and intuitive example. Uh, why are you altruistic, really? Why do you do things for your fellow man? I got a plumber working in front of the house right now. Why am I going to pay him? Why is he plumbing for me? I mean, this is his Saturday. He could be doing other things. He's got this opportunity cost things. We're dependent upon each other. We've become addicted to each other. It's not, this will sound base, but I do think it is grounded more in cost benefit analysis than us choosing to be lofty and loyal. I have lost the ability to farm, to plumb, to do electricity for myself. I've lost the ability to make my life sustainable because of the availability of other people who do it for me. This is actually my explanation for hierarchy. And I came up with something that will also be a video, soon to be a minor motion picture. Mothering is the invention of necessity. I mean something very clear by that. So what we're talking about is hierarchy grows through relaxed selection, by which I mean relaxed selective pressure. Just try this out. So imagine you had some skills, and there, and your boss wanted to bring in his nephew to run your department. He didn't want to lose you as an employee, so he gives you an R&D department. Or imagine that you're a professor and they give you a sabbatical, or just any sort of situation where you no longer have to deliver something to someone else. And you've already got all these skills. You're not a random mutation. You've got chops, what I call already been chosen degradable elements. That they already are under functional, they're already functional. You've got your skills, but they're no longer under pressure. You don't need to show up every day and deliver the same thing over and over. This is why we like vacations and all that. Well, you get to play with what you've got, and a lot of that is mix and match. So you mix and match. Let's say your whole team. Let's say it's COVID, and your team cannot work in the factory, but you get to talk to each other, and you commingle, and you're playing with each other's ideas, and as a result, you generate something new that's useful for the company, and that's how hierarchy emerges. I'd have to explain more about how that works, but think about it. If you know about the endosymbiont hypothesis for how we ended up with eukaryotic cells, which are basically a cell within a cell, that explains that hierarchical move. As these two cells merge, they were both affording each other advantages, just like a grocery store keeps me from having to make my own food. And that freed me up to do something that was good for the grocery store. That's endosymbiosis. That's interesting, Toto. No, I haven't thought about that, but that's a good one. Survival of the fit inness. It's kind of fit withness. Is another way to think about it. Survival of the fit withness is that you'll only find that out when you're under relaxed selection. So Terry is writing a book about this. It's called Falling Up. The falling is I lost my capacities. That's why I'm altruistic. That's why I depend on the internet guys or YouTube or any of that stuff, is because I've lost capacity to do for myself, and this gave me an advantage, and now I'm addicted to it, and it's addicted to me. That's how you get synergies. And in some cases, not all synergies are like this. For example, we've been doing work on how we ended up with 4 different kinds of hemoglobin and how that became advantageous, how it became possible. That would also have been a relaxed selection story, a mothering meaning you're protected. You can afford to play because you're protected by something. Invention is the play. It's the commingling. It's the co-assortment is how we think about it in biology. And the necessity is that you generate this new thing. We're totally dependent now on having 4 different kinds of hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is the transport system for oxygen, and there's a challenge that you would need to solve if you're going to be if you're going to have mammalian birth, which is you got this baby inside you, and you got this oxygen grabbing molecule, Well, grab all the damn molecules, all the oxygen, and the baby wouldn't get any. So a mother goes through stages where she moves into different combinations of the molecule of the elements that make up the hemoglobin, so that it can give the baby more. It loosens its grip on oxygen during 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 gestation. All of that. Okay, all of that and more. Okay, so I don't like to wear out my welcome. I hate that. So, and it's 12:29. So here's what I'm going to do. Uh, uh, I'm going to come back next week, and I'm probably going to come back at a different. No, no, I'm going to come back at the same time next week. Let me know if this time This is always a problem. I don't. If you're here, apparently this time works for you. But I would love to know um, if there was a better time, because I have time. I have flexible time. I have a very full to-do list and a flexible schedule. So and also, if you're interested in this kind of stuff, i- do subscribe to me. Do friend me on Facebook, Jeremy Unsure Sherman, because I'm generating all the time, and it's shorter than this. And it's usually where my ideas start first. So if I were to do a membership thing on YouTube, that'd be where you get the hot ideas fresh off the press. Oh, um, look, I love them. I love them. They are the currency I live on, is new insights, mostly coming from discovering new controgrades. Discovering, oh, I'm of two minds about this, or listening to someone else of two minds, or listening to people who pretend they're of one mind when they're of two minds. That's fascinating to me. Do watch the Montgomery Gentry. What do you think about that? I think it's called. Or don't care what other people think. It's just, that's the best follow-up you could do to this conversation. Jeremy Unsure Sherman there. Thank you very much. Oh, by the way, if you're on Substack, I'm hanging by a skin tag on there. I have almost no followers. I want to build that out, and I would love it if you do that. Thank you, guys. Thank you all for being here, and I will see you next week if you show up. All right. Thanks.